Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Radha Govardhana Radha Govardhana Shri Radhe. Jaya Vishpad Paramahamsa Parivraj Jagadash Shrimada's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhu Maharaj Ki Jaya Vishpad Paramahamsa Parivraj Jagadash Shrimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhu Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Primskaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So today we're reading from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. We're up to chapter number 8 of the Adi-lila, and we'll do text 13, 14 and 15 today. So we'll start with text number 13. Ataiva punya kohan udva bahuhana. Ataiva puna kohun udva bahuhana. Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kutaka Kadiya. Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kutaka Kadiya. Taiva Puna Kahon Udva Bahuhana. Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kotaka Chadiya. Udva Bahuhana Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kutaka Chadiya Ataiva Punya Kahun Udva Bahuhana Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kutaka Chadiya Ataiva Punya Kahun Udva Bahuhana Caitanya Nityananda Bhaja Kutaka Chadiya. Any ladies want to have a chant? We'll go to the word for word. Ataiva, therefore. Puna, again. Kahon, I speak. Udva, lifting. Bahu, arms. Hana, so doing. Caitanya, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Nityananda, Lord Nityananda. Bhaja, worship. Kutaka, useless arguments. Chadiya, giving up. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Therefore I say again, lifting my arms, O fellow human beings, please worship Sri Caitanya and Nityananda without false arguments. Purport. Because a person who performs Krishna Bhakti but does not understand Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Prabhu Nityananda will simply waste his time. The author Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami requests everyone take to the worship of Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu and the Panchatattva. He assures everyone that any person who does so will be successful in Krishna consciousness. So we'll continue on. Text number 14. Yadiva takika kahi taka se praman taka shastri siddhaye se sevyamana. Translation. Logicians say unless one gains understanding through logic and argument, how can one decide upon a worshipable deity? Text number 15. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Daya Kaha Vichara Karale Chita Pabe Chamatkara. Translation. If you are indeed interested in logic and argument, kindly apply it to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you will find it to be strikingly wonderful. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments in this connection that people in general, in their narrow-minded conception of life, create many different types of humanitarian activities. But the humanitarian activities inaugurated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are quite different. For logicians who want to accept only that which is proven through logic and argument, it is a fact that without logic and reason, there can be no question of accepting the absolute truth. Unfortunately, when such logicians take to this path without the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they remain on the platform of logic and argument and do not advance in spiritual life. However, if one is intelligent enough to apply his arguments and logic to the subtle understanding of the fundamental spiritual substance, he will be able to know that a poor fund of knowledge established on the basis of material logic cannot help one understand the absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of imperfect senses. The Mahabharata therefore says, Achincha kalu ye baba natams takena yojayet. It's Mahabharata Bhishma Parva 522. How can that which is beyond the imagination or sensory speculation of mundane creatures be approached simply by logic? Logic and argument are very poor in spiritual strength and always imperfect when applied to spiritual understanding. By putting forward mundane logic, one frequently comes to the wrong conclusion regarding the absolute truth, and as a result of such a conclusion, one may fall down to accept the body like that of a jackal. Despite all this, those who are actually inquisitive to understand the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through logic and argument are welcome. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami addresses them, quote, "Please put Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy to your crucial test, and if you are actually a logician, you will come to the right conclusion that there is no personality more merciful than Lord Chaitanya." End of quote. Let the logicians compare all the results of other humanitarian work with the merciful activities of Lord Chaitanya. If their judgment is impartial, they will understand that no other humanitarian activities can surpass those of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone is engaged in humanitarian activities on the basis of the body. But from Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 text 18 we can understand Anta Banta Ime Deha Nitya Shokya Sharina. The material body is ultimately subject to destruction, whereas the spiritual soul is eternal. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philanthropic activities are performed in connection with the eternal soul. However one tries to benefit the body, it will be destroyed, and one will have to accept another body according to his present activities. If one does not, therefore, understand the science of transmigration, but considers the body to be all in all, his intelligence is not very advanced. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, without neglecting the necessities of the body, imparted spiritual advancement to purify the existential condition of humanity. Therefore, if a logician makes his judgment impartially, he will surely find that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Mahavadanyavata, the most magnanimous incarnation. He is even more magnanimous than Lord Krishna himself. Lord Krishna demanded that one surrender unto him, but he did not distribute love of Godhead as magnanimously as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami offers Lord Chaitanya his respectful obeisances with the words Namo Mahavadanyanya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauraveshe Namaha. Lord Krishna simply gave Bhagavad Gita, by which one can understand Lord Krishna as he is. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is also Krishna himself, gave people love of Krishna without discrimination. Omagana Trimanandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Umitam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Therefore I say, again lifting my arms, O fellow human beings, please worship Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda without false arguments. Logicians say, unless one gains understanding through logic and argument, how can one decide upon a worshipable deity? If you are indeed interested in logic and argument, kindly apply it to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you will find it to be strikingly wonderful. So I put a PowerPoint together to make things a bit more interesting. It was another wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. One thing that struck me from the purport was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's comment about people in general, in their narrow-minded conception of life, create many different types of humanitarian activities. But the humanitarian activities inaugurated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are different. So it's quite an interesting concept about what actually is a narrow-minded conception of life according to the Vedic standard. So when we read the Bhagavad Gita, we're introduced to this concept quite early on about what it means to be narrow-minded. We find in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is giving different reasons for why he shouldn't have to fight in this battle for. He gives the five main reasons for his justification about not fighting, and these reasons were based on logic, rationality, even Shastra, and also humanitarian pleading as well. So from a material point of view, Arjuna was completely justified in giving his reasoning for not wanting to fight for in this battle. Does anybody know what any of the 5 reasons were for not fighting in the Battle of Kurukshetra? There's 5 of them. Oh, you know, Shanti. You teach Bhakti Shastri. Anybody else though? One of the 5 reasons that Arjuna gave for not fighting. Oh, you can do. Shanti teaches Bhakti Shastri, so he knows it all.
Compassion.
Yeah, compassion, yeah. So he doesn't want to kill his loved ones, like he's feeling compassion because the opposing army are his family, his friends, his relatives. So based on grounds of compassion, he's like, I don't want to fight. How can I kill my own relatives and and family. And Prabhupada comments because of Arjuna's soft-heartedness. So because Arjuna is a great devotee, he's a Maha Bhagavat, he's soft-hearted. So based on his soft-heartedness, he's saying, my compassion, I can't do this. So anybody else know any of the other four? We've got one, compassion.
Kuladharma, as in his dynasty, will lead to the ruination of his dynasty.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like he enjoyment, which comes under the category of enjoyment, that he thinks that, well, how can I really enjoy a kingdom if we win when I've killed all my loved ones? So how can there be enjoyment or pleasure for me in that? So yeah, based on that, he says, I don't want to fight either. Also tied into that is destruction of family, because he says, if we kill all the Kshatriyas, then the woman won't be protected, and then there'll be Vana Sankara, unwanted progeny, and also the Vedic rituals will stop, so therefore the family will go to hell as a result of that. So that's based on Shastric understanding. So he was really giving it to Krishna. He's even using Shastric dharmic evidence to say, no, why I shouldn't fight for. Anyone know? There's two more. So compassion, enjoyment, destruction of family, and there's two more.
Sinful.
Yeah, his fear of sinful reactions, that he's worried about undergoing sinful reactions for killing so many people. Because we understand if you're killing against dharmic principles, then there are sinful reactions for doing that. And the last one is indecision. Yeah, so that he wasn't convinced that by conquering Duryodhana is better than being conquered by them. He's thinking, well, the way that Duryodhana is running the planet, it's actually going quite nicely. So what benefit is there going to be to us defeating Duryodhana and killing them all? Maybe it's just better if they stay in power, and we just relinquish our right to the throne. So materially speaking, Arjuna was quite correct. But what does Krishna say to him? How did Arjuna's humanitarian reasoning and logic go down with Krishna? He rejected it. He says, no, how have these impurities come upon you? What you're saying is very not worthy of those who know the higher goal of life, like one who is an Aryan, who knows the higher understandings of life, and you're speaking these words. So the Christian rejected Arjuna's logic and reasoning and humanitarian pleads to him. And of course he goes on to speak to him the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, explaining the difference between matter and spirit and how he's not the body, and ultimately how Arjuna should surrender to Krishna. And he says, Sarvadhamma prityaja mamikam saranambraja, that don't fear these sinful reactions, have no fear. Give up all this logic, give up all your dharma, and just surrender unto me. So it's of humanitarianism from the Vedic standard. It's based on the spiritual platform, not on the material platform. So it's further elaborated as well in the Nectar of Devotion by Rupa Goswami, if you can see on the chart there. It talks about, you could call it the cycle of samsara, or the cycle of ignorance, or avidya. So this is the real problem actually that humanity is facing. I mean, obviously there's so many issues and problems around the world at the moment. Take your pick: environmental issues, political problems, economic problems, the list goes on and on and on and on. Animal rights, human rights, all these things are there. And it's natural that people want to help and make the world a better place. And there are so many philanthropic causes and humanitarian causes these days to try and improve the condition. But it has to be based on knowledge, applied knowledge, which goes a bit deeper than just adjusting material circumstances. Was it Einstein said that you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that's creating the problem in the first place? So we can see, despite there being so many philanthropic organisations, there's still so many problems in the world. They don't seem to be resolving anything. Prabhupada said the same with the United Nations. Even though the United Nations was created, it still hasn't solved wars, fighting and squabbling. These things are still going on. So we have to go a bit deeper with our understanding about how to apply philanthropic and humanitarian causes. So it talks about, in the Nectar of Devotion, it covers this, how you have, it all begins with avidya, or this ignorance. Sabo Padi Vinemuktam, that we accept these upadis, these false designations, that we are the body. Oh, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a this, I'm a that. So that's the beginning of ignorance, identifying the self with the body. And when one identifies the self with the body, we have desires, material desires, or bija, sinful desires. And then from these sinful desires comes sinful action, or pap, sinful activity. And then from sinful activity comes unmanifest reaction, aparabdha karmas. And then when those karmas are manifest, they become parabdha karmas, which results in happiness and distress. I think as Devamrita Swami explains that whether you have tin handcuffs or gold handcuffs, either way you're still bound. You know, you may have nice golden handcuffs or tin handcuffs, but either way you're still bound. So karmas, whether good or bad, bind us to the material world. And then from these sinful activities and sinful actions, we develop a further disposition towards sinful activity. And then that's called kuta, and then from those kuta come more desires, and then from those desires come more sinful activity. So it goes on and on and on and on. And this is the real problem. This is going on lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So Rupa Goswami, in the Nectar of Devotion, he elaborates that, gives a nice example that the Sanskrit word kutam means that they are almost ready to produce the seed or the effect of the seed. An immature effect refers to the case where the seedling has not begun. From this statement of Padma Purana, it is understood that material contamination is very subtle. Its beginning, its fruition and results, and how one suffers such results in the form of distress are part of a great chain. When one catches some disease, it is often very difficult to ascertain the cause of the disease, where it originated and how it is maturing. The suffering of a disease, however, does not appear all of a sudden. It actually takes time. And as in the medical field, for precaution's sake, the doctor injects a vaccination to prevent the growing of contamination. The practical injection to stop all the fructifications of seeds of our sinful activities is simply engagement in Krishna consciousness. So, Savo Podivinim Makdam Paribha Nemalam Hushikena Hushikesha Sevanam Bhakta Uchate. So, by engaging our senses in the master of the senses, then we get free of these false designations and we become purified. Those are the results of engaging in bhakti. Our senses become purified and we become free of these false designations. And that's really the only way that we can solve the situation that we're in. It says, you have to take care of your own garden first, right? Look after your own backyard. So before we want to go and help the world and solve so many problems, we have to know how to help ourselves first, which is understanding what we are, who we are, understanding what our situation is with knowledge, with gyan, and applying that knowledge in our life as well. How to live in the world. What did Jesus say? To be in the world but not of the world. Right? How to live in the world but simultaneously not be bound by the laws of this world. So that's what Bhakti Yoga is. It's the practical application of that concept of being in the world but not of the world. And Prabhupada further elaborates in this section of the Nectar of Devotion. He says that pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the highest enlightenment, and when such enlightenment is there, it is just like a blazing forest fire, killing all the inauspicious snakes of desire. The example is given in this connection that when there is a forest fire, the extensive blazing automatically kills all the snakes in the forest. There are many snakes on the ground of the forest, and when the fire takes place, it burns the dried foliage, and the snakes are immediately attacked. Animals who have 4 legs can flee from the fire, or can at least try to flee, but the snakes are immediately killed. Similarly, the blazing fire of Krishna consciousness is so strong that the snakes of ignorance are immediately killed. And just as a proviso to that, and it's also elaborated on in the purport here, just because we don't identify the self with the body, it doesn't mean that we neglect the body. And it says here that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, without neglecting the necessities of the body, imparted spiritual advancement to purify the existential condition of humanity. yeah, so spiritual life doesn't mean neglecting the body. Like sometimes people hear that, oh, we're not the body, so it means that we neglect the body, or we give up on the body and we don't take care of the body nicely. But Krishna consciousness means understanding the body as Krishna's energy, so we look after it from that context, so that the body is maintained nicely so we can serve Krishna very nicely. Because sometimes you see, I remember when I was a younger devotee in the Brahmachari ashram in New Zealand, we had one devotee who was doing all these austerities and eating very simply, and basically wasn't looking after himself, and he ended up getting anorexia. So it's not the goal of it. So not the goal is to become sick and unwell and unhealthy, because then you can't do any service. We look after the body so we can serve Krishna very, very nicely and serve the devotees very nicely as well. So with that understood, or that understanding that real humanitarianism has to begin from the spiritual concept of life, this purport today is elaborating on how Caitanya Mahaprabhu is actually the most magnanimous humanitarian. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is saying, look, if you're interested in lodging an argument, kindly apply it to the mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you'll find it to be strikingly wonderful. So Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is the most magnanimous incarnation, the greatest philanthropist and the greatest humanitarian, because he came to solve the problems of our existence in this world, which is birth, death, old age and disease. That's the real issue, that's the real problem. So until people understand that concept, how can you really solve the problem? If we're stuck in a cycle of repeated birth and death, how can you really solve anything from there on if you don't understand that point? So Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he actually took sannyas, took the renounced order of life when he was only 24 years of age. So at that time, it's explained he had a very wonderful wife, was Vishnu Priya, who was very chaste and very devoted. He had a mother Sachi, who's loved him more than herself, loved more than her own life. She had so much care and affection for Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So Lord Caitanya had been performing this wonderful Sankirtan pastimes around Bengal and Navadvip, and had attracted so many people, and so many people had taken to Krishna consciousness just through seeing Lord Chaitanya and the Panchatattva performing their Sankirtan kirtan. So many people became devotees, young, old, children, men, old women. So many took to Krishna consciousness upon seeing this manifestation of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan pastimes. But despite that, it's explained that there were still certain groups of people who were still avoiding this mercy of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's thinking, well, how can I be the most magnanimous incarnation if I can't deliver everybody? So there were many different types of groups. There were impersonal monists who don't believe in a personal conception of God, and they think that they are God, and they claim that we are God. Another group was selfish materialists who think life is meant for gratifying the senses. There were false logicians, persons who use their intelligence to justify aims in life other than the pursuit of self-realisation. And there were blasphemers and non-devotees. And it's explained that arrogant members of the student community. And it says that all these rascals somehow managed to avoid the inundation of love for Krishna. So Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu was concerned about these different types of people who weren't surrendering to this process of Krishna consciousness and becoming absorbed in love of God, this Krishna prem, which he had come to distribute freely to everybody. So even some of them began forming groups and coalitions to challenge and attack when Lord Chaitanya, when he was called Nimai Pandit, because at that time Nimai Pandit, he was the most famous scholar in Bengal at the time, and so people were getting envious of him that he was going around defeating all these different philosophies. So they began forming a coalition against him. So he began thinking that the only way that he could resolve the situation is if he renounced his family life and took the order of sannyas, and therefore all of these people, because he is a sannyas, would have to offer him respect and offer their obeisances, and that they would become purified. So Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, with that understanding, he went to Katwa which I think Indra Swami goes on a tour there. He went there recently to Katwa, to the place that Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. And then when he returned, the word got out that this Nimai Pandit, this beautiful Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, had shaved all his hair off and was wearing the robes of a sannyasi renunciate. So you can understand that Mother Sachi's heart was broken by hearing this. All the devotees were lamenting that, how is this possible? And at the same time, they were ecstatic, but at the same time, they were lamenting that this beautiful Nimai Pandit, this beautiful son of Mother Sachi, had taken to the renounced order of life. So the devotees got together, and then Mother Sachi at the time pleaded, because I think at the time Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was thinking of going to live in Vrindavan and renounce the world in Vrindavan. But on the pleadings of his mother, Mother Sachi, she said, please reside in Jagannath Puri, which is in Orissa, the state next to us, so at least then we can hear about how you were going. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu agreed to Mother Sachi's request, and then after touring South India, he resided in Jagannath Puri, where he left this world. So after taking this order of sannyas, then all these different people who were rejecting him or not showing proper respect all became purified and became devotees and took to the Sankirtan movement as well. So it's an interesting point, just elaborating further on this understanding of what humanitarian work actually is. It's explained that the Lord wanted therefore to teach by his example that we should completely dedicate our lives to para upakar, working selflessly for the benefit of others. Thus by his vow he formally declared he had no ambition to fulfill but to seek the well-being of others, and he instructed all his followers to adopt the same mentality. Like any true devotee of God, Caitanya Mahaprabhu did not prescribe material solutions to the problems of life. He knew they would not work. Unlike the humanists, he had no sentimental notions about making a permanent arrangement for happiness in this material world. He taught that this material world is, by its very nature, temporary. Consequently, no problem, no solution, no war, no peace, no happiness, no distress, no ideology, no nation, nothing in this world can last forever. This is the insurmountable law of nature. But the immaterial soul within the body is eternal and by constitutional nature blissful. The frustrations and anxieties of life are primarily due to our futile search for permanent satisfaction with the ever-changing temporary material world. Out of his mercy, the Lord wanted to give the frustrated souls of this world a permanent solution to the problems of life. He wanted to give them an eternal body, an eternal senses, an eternal abode, and eternal blissful relationships with himself and as pure devotees. He wanted all the fallen souls to join him in the spiritual kingdom of God, and toward that end he prescribed the simple and sublime life of Krishna consciousness, especially the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. This practice purifies the heart and liberates the soul from the illusion of accepting the body as the self. It awakens the soul to his forgotten identity as the eternal servant of Krishna and brings freedom to the cycle of repeated birth and death. No material solution to life's miseries, therefore, is comparable to Krishna consciousness, because no material solution is permanent. So Prabhupada gave a nice example as well about the example of, blowing on the boil, right? I know if you've had a boil before, they're very, very uncomfortable. Usually when devotees go to India, they get a boil. They get a swelling on the body. So Prabhupada said, like, humanitarian and material philanthropic activities are a bit like blowing on the boil. It's not really going to help anything. That you have to lance or cut the boil and let the toxins come out of the body. So that's the example of Prabhupada said that one time when I think he was in India, and was it some philanthropic organisation, a representative had come to see Prabhupada and was asking Prabhupada if they could help with their philanthropic work in India, like feeding the homeless or feeding the hungry, whatever it may be. So they gave their presentation to Prabhupada about, this is what we're doing, and we're feeding homeless, we're feeding hungry, and it'd be very nice if your organisation can join with us. And then Prabhupada's response is, if you wave incense in the toilet, does it make the toilet a nice place? the person didn't quite understand what Prabhupada was saying, and so Prabhupada repeated, if you wave incense in the toilet, does that make the toilet a nice place? And so I think they got the idea of what Prabhupada is saying, is that why are you trying to make the material world such a nice place for? That the real problem is birth, death, old age and disease. So you should be helping us, in our humanitarian work, not the other way around. So quite interesting, Prabhupada's approach when he was dealing with philanthropists. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having that desire. I think it's probably innate within most of us that we want to help out people, and we don't want to see people suffering, especially devotees. We want to help humanity out the best possible way. And Prabhupada also, was he in Mayapur when he saw some children fighting with the dogs over a pile of rubbish to get food scraps? And Prabhupada, he became very emotional when he saw that, and he said from there that no one should go hungry within, was it a 12-mile radius of a temple? I think was that what he said, 12 miles? So Prabhupada also didn't like to see suffering going on. He felt compassion for them, but of course his concept was to give people prasadam, give them Krishna in the form of prasadam, because that's obviously the best way to help them out in the unfortunate circumstances that they've taken birth in, is by purifying themselves and taking to Krishna consciousness. So that's the mood of a devotee, is that we try and solve these problems by giving Krishna to others in one way or another, in a sensitive, tasteful, considerate way. So there's another interesting point, just elaborating on this idea of humanitarianism and philanthropy. This world is another world. Devamrita Swami talks about this in his book, Hiding in Unnatural Happiness, this concept of this world is and other worlders. So in an article I was reading, an interesting point, that the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, the modern followers of Lord Caitanya, are sometimes criticised for their renunciation of mundane family life and materialistic values. These critics consider mundane morality, achievements of mundane distinction, and the accumulation of material goods and facilities to be essential for keeping one's prestige and credibility as a responsible member of society. Indeed, they consider such things to be the topmost goal of human life. One of their strongest criticisms, rooted in a long-standing fundamental dichotomy between spiritualists and materialists, is that Krishna-conscious devotees are not concerned enough about humanistic values and the ameliorating of the plight of humankind. So Devamrita Maharaj, he calls that concept of this world as an otherworlders. So otherworlders, he explains, have their eyes on the prize, viewing our earthly habitation as just a training school for the celestial hereafter. Withdrawing from the temporal affairs of this temporary world, they concentrate on their own internal development. Like mystic yogis in the Himalayas, the desert fathers of early Christianity, and some monks and nuns even today, otherworlders seclude themselves from the din of daily life, secure that all things will pass. Disenchanted by the despair and evil plaguing humanity, they may also pray and meditate for the well-being of all as they prepare for what awaits us beyond, whether it be nirvana, heaven, the vast oneness, or the great unknown. So that's one type of person who want to help out, otherworlders you could call them. And then there's he terms as this worlders. So this worlders live to embrace our existence on earth in toto, including all its joys and sorrows. Often avowed activists, humanitarians and environmentalists, they plant their feet and keep their vision firmly on the ground, right here and now, and the belief that human vigour and aspiration focused on terra firma can improve life for billions of unfortunate people. Aching to change the surrounding world economically, politically and ecologically, this worlders may resent the other world perspective as a nuisance or worse, an impediment. Why co-opt the amazing transformative potential of humanity, energy desperately needed for global renovation, and dreamily dissipate it into the clouds? As noted sociologist of secularism Phil Zuckerman writes, quote, "If you believe that this is the only world and there is no afterlife, that's going to motivate you to make it as good a place as possible. Are we going to pray to end crime in our city, or are we going to look at the root causes?" It's interesting that this sociologist, Paul Zuckerman, he's also an author as well, and basically he's an atheist, and he's written books about how there is no God and living a moral secular life without God. We don't need religion, we don't need God. So he's a good example of one of these this worlders who say, well, no, there is no God, we don't need religion, we can solve things through making up our own morality and so forth. So as David Swami explains further, that to find comprehensive, satisfying answers to our questions, we must resolve the divide between this worlders and the other worlders thinking, and unite the inner and outer, the here and the hereafter. It is a challenge met with consummate majesty by the yoga classic, the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita, for short, is a standard authoritative text for the complete yoga ladder, presenting this world yoga and other world yoga interlinked. So it's a valid point that not that we have to have this dichotomy of this worlders and other worlders, or atheistic and theistic people, that the Bhagavad Gita is actually bringing these two concepts together. So in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, the perfect yogi, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. So that's really the solution, is developing transcendental vision, like seeing the world as an energy coming from Krishna. We can't see it as a separate thing from Krishna. We have to understand that the material and the spiritual are both energies emanating from the ultimate source, which is Krishna. So a real yogi or a yogic process is how to develop that vision, that inner vision and that outer vision, as seeing everything connected back to Krishna again. And as David Swami explains, that when we're cultivating that concept or that consciousness, we begin to perceive that the world is a combination of material and spiritual energies emanating from Krishna, the ultimate fount. Those energies are neither ours to plunder or exploit, nor ours to discard or negate. Since everything, both matter and spirit, is the energy of the Supreme, we must hear from the Supreme how to engage it. A fundamental principle of sane existence is that we cannot concoct our own rules, our own style of interaction. So, a very valid and important point is that we have to hear from the source of where these energies are coming from Krishna, so we can learn how to interface with the material world. As he says here, not seeing it as a place for us to plunder and exploit, nor to discard or negate, but how to engage in it in its proper manner, its proper usage. So that's what Krishna consciousness is about. That's what Lord Chaitanya was teaching, is how to be in the world but not of the world, how to operate and function within the world in a balanced way, and at the same time developing spiritual consciousness. So we know that Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita was wanting to renounce everything and go live in a cave. That was his solution. Well, this is all too hard, this is all too much, I can't handle it, I'm just going to become a monk and live in a cave. So, of course, that's not practical. We can't all just give up the material world and live in a cave, even though we probably feel like it sometimes. The way the world is going is go live in a cave and get away from everybody. But it doesn't work that way. We have senses, we have desires. So the science of Krishna consciousness is how to engage our senses in the material world in the most beneficial way for ourselves and also for the planet around us. So this is real humanitarianism, real philanthropy as taught by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So anyway, it's 8:30. We can stop and ask if there's any questions or points. Anybody would like to contribute? If you don't, we can stop and we can eat prasadam. All right, all goes to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai.